Hello and welcome to the Dumb Shit's Guide to Mekanism. In this video, I'll be explaining the basics of the Mekanism early game, going through everything up until the gas burning generator, and explaining how everything works. Now let's start off with the first tool you're going to want to make, the configurator. This is very useful as it allows you to configure pipes and configure devices. This isn't a 100% necessity, but for the sake of this part of the tutorial, we're going to need it because we're going to be talking about the different types of cables. To start off with, we have the logistical transporter. This, basically what it does is it takes items from point A to point B. How do you configure which one goes where? Simple. So if we look at our configurator, we hold down sneak and we scroll. You can configure fluids, gases, infused types, pigments, slurries, energy, heat, nothing, rotate, wrench, or items. We're going to do items for this example because items will work on any type of cable. So let's sneak, right click again, and that configures this type to pull. And this one, if we click, then it configures it to push. Now, if we grab a stack of these, you can see if we put them in, they'll automatically flow into this chest because it's set to pull from here and push into there. The same thing can be done with mechanical pipes. Mechanical pipes, instead of transmitting items, transmit fluids. Pressurized tubes are the same, but they transmit gases. The universal cable is very useful because it transmits energy and works with a lot of mods. In fact, this is probably my go-to when it comes to energy transfer in my playthroughs because it just works and it works with pretty much every machine, and it can convert to a lot of different mods energy types, so it's a very useful tool to have. I love the universal cable. Next we have the thermodynamic conductor, which conducts heat. Now we have the logistical sorter. This isn't a cable, it's a sorting device. Let's talk about some of the settings in here. So start with the upgrades. These ones can't really get any upgrades except for the muffling upgrade, but you won't really need that because it's not very loud. Now let's talk about how it works. So there's one side, which I believe is, this side is the input, that side's the output. Now, inside, you can choose to send a single item instead of a whole stack. If single is on, it'll send one item. If single is off, it'll send a stack. If RR is round robin, so it'll cycle between connected inventories. If it's on, round robin will be on. If it's off, round robin will be off. Anything that's unfiltered will be automatically ejected to connected inventories using the default configuration. Usually you want to leave this off. Like, so for example, we have like a chest here and this is on. Any item that's not filtered will be automatically ejected. Now let's talk about the filters. So basically the item filter, you pick an item and there's a few settings. So this one, I'm not really sure what it does. This one's not really important. Most of this you probably won't need to know as a beginner for most use cases. The important ones are fuzzy mode. This basically allows different NBT data. So for example, if you have 2 diamond swords with different durability, then you're going to want fuzzy sword on, or fuzzy mode on, and then have the filter set to diamond sword. So it'll pull out everything that fits the diamond sword tag, but has different NBT data. Size mode is not really that important. What we have here is the minimum and maximum amount of a certain item you want to send at a given time. This one's also not really that important. You really won't need to use this in most cases, just because you can set it to either put singles over here or whole stacks over here. So you can choose how many of an item you want to send, but that's not really important. Tag is a type of item. So for example, if you want item type planks, for example, then you would set the tag to, I believe it'd be Minecraft planks. So you can see, since we set the tag to Minecraft planks, any type of plank will be automatically sorted. Then we have mod ID. This is basically, let's go through our JEI and find a random mod. Let's go, all the modium. So we set that, ID all the modium. Anything from the mod, all the modium, will work. Will come through this logistical sorter, which is very helpful if you've got, this is all the mods 9. So if we go, you've got your like digital miner going or whatnot, and you want to filter out all the GregTech ores to be processed separately, drag, drop, and everything from GregTech will immediately go through that filter. Now, how do the different filters work? So let's say you want to go to two separate chests with different items in them. So we'll go like this and like this. And then we'll configure these ones to be blue by clicking in the middle of the pipes. We'll place a chest here and a chest here. And then we'll grab some oak logs and some spruce doors. And then we'll set a new filter, item stack, planks, or logs, sorry. I'm going to set that to blue by clicking on this box. This cycles through all the different colors. So we set that to blue. And we create a new one, item stack, and we set it to create new item stack, select the door, and save. If we chuck these in here, so we put this in here, it's automatically going to go down the blue channel. If we put this in here, it's automatically going to go down the clear channel. So it'll automatically split off based on the color of the pipe. Now that we've got the pipes explained, let's explain your early game power generation. So to start off with, you're probably going to get the heat generator. This is probably the first you're going to build. I think it's the first you can build because it's the only one that doesn't require resources made by other machines in the mod. So for example, the wind generator requires infused alloy, which requires a metallurgic infuser to make. So we've got the heat generator. Basically, the more sides of the device that are covered with a heat source, the more energy it produces. In this case, we've got lava. So we've got the universal cable coming out the front to take the energy. We've got lava on all sides to produce it. Next, you're going to want to get the wind generator. The wind generator is passive and will automatically produce power wherever it has access to, like sort of outside. So I don't believe you can place these underground, but they work on the surface. If they're not obstructed as well. If we go over here, grab some of this. If you obstruct it, like so, then it gets stuck. So it has to have air on all sides so it can spin. Next, we have the basic and the advanced solar generator. These basically do what the title says, is that they produce energy based off of sunlight. And then the biogenerator, you use biofuel. What you do is you place biofuel inside here, and it automatically produces energy, and also bioethanol. And it'll slowly burn through this bioethanol. So you can keep this stocked up with biofuel and it'll produce energy. And then you can take that energy out using a universal cable. Now let's talk about the configuring of sides on our machines before we actually start talking about the machines, because this is the part that gets a lot of people. I'm choosing this entangler porter just because it allows me to demonstrate how the different sides work. So we're going to start with items. And so basically this, you can configure what machine produces or accepts what based on these tabs. So each machine will have different tabs. Some will only have, for example, items, fluids, and gases, or some might have only items and fluids, or items and infused types. We'll use items for example. So this is the front, this is the back, bottom, right, left, top. And it's very convenient. It'll tell you which things, like if you're confused which direction the machine's facing, for example, we go like this, it'll show that this block is on the right hand side. So we know that this is the right hand side of the block. Because for example, if we go over here and grab a metallurgic infuser, that's not the right thing. So right now, yes, this looks like right. But if we're looking at it from the back, then right is left. So we just place an item down here and see, so right is on this side. You can configure each of these to input, output and output, none, and I believe in some cases, so if we go back over here, there's also extra. So if we go input, output, energy, and extra, this is the important one for a lot of things because this confuses a lot of people. So for example, you want X item to come in. So you want, for your machine, you have gases coming in this side, and then you have items coming in this side, and then you have the output coming out this side. You would go front as the output, then we want gases coming in from the, so we want to set it to input, and then we want items also set to input on the left. So front is output for items, right is the input for gases, and left is the input for items. And this can be done with all of these. Now let's talk about a few of your starting machines. The first one you're going to get is the metallurgic infuser. This one, basically you take a infused type, in this case redstone dust, which will add redstone infusion to this metallurgical infuser. You place an iron ingot, and if we wait through this out, it'll create one infused alloy. There you go. So it creates, so basically it infuses one resource with another one. So if we have a look through in here, logic infuser. Okay, let's have a look in here. So for example, you could infuse biomass with stone brick stairs to create mossy stone stairs, or you can just use it for the mechanism mods stuff, like for example, different types of alloys. In this case, this one requiring 20 millibuckets of diamond. Now, what are the millibuckets? Basically, 10 millibuckets equals one item in most cases. So for example, in this one, we just made the infused alloy. That took 10 millibuckets of redstone and an iron ingot, so that's one redstone. In this one right here, we need 20 millibuckets of diamond dust, so we need 2 diamond dust and 1 infused alloy for 1 reinforced alloy. Next up, we have the osmium compressor. This basically uses osmium, which is the infused type. However, it's not a metallurgic infusion, it's an osmium infusion, which is a bit confusing, but you get the hang of it eventually. 1 ingot of osmium does not necessarily give you that amount of millibuckets of osmium. Usually for most recipes, you're just going to need just over 1 osmium ingot. It's very confusing, and I'm not entirely understanding of it myself, but just remember that in most cases, so most recipes require around 210 millibuckets. I think 1 ingot is 200 millibuckets, I'm pretty sure, but now we have this refined obsidian. You don't need to worry about this too much, because I believe the only things you can make in an osmium compressor, hold up. Yeah, I believe the only things you can make in the osmium compressor are refined obsidian and refined glowstone. Refined glowstone, you really don't use that much either, to be honest. You use it occasionally, but not much. Next, we have the enrichment chamber. This basically enriches certain items. So basically, the enrichment chamber creates more of something based off of an input. For example, so this osmium, when we mine it, would give us 1 osmium, raw osmium. However, we've got 2 osmium dust, which can be smelted into 2 ingots. So this is your first form of early game ore duping. It has other uses as well, but usually it's just for ore duping or like a few mechanism recipes. Like for example, like the crimson iron, you can get 12 from 9 or 2 diamonds for a diamond. It can also use to change what type of item a certain block is, but that's not really that useful. Here we have raw osmium. 3 of them create 4 dust. Even better, 2 ores will create 4 dust. So that's actually 1 less than for this recipe. You can also use it for other things like creating dyes. So if you want more than 1 sunflower, or if you want more than 1 yellow dye per sunflower, you can enrich the sunflower to create 4 yellow dye. Or you can create enriched items like enriched coal, which can be used in the metallurgical infuser and actually have more millibuckets per item than a normal piece of coal. Let's say coal, for example. So 1 coal in our metallurgical infuser would give us 10 millibuckets, whereas 1 enriched carbon gives about 80, which is a lot more. So a good idea is running everything through a enrichment chamber first, so that it can produce more infusions per 1 item, which is useful for large-scale late-game auto crafting. Next, we have the crusher. So the crusher crushes things. We put an item in, and it crushes it down into any given dust. So if we look over here, we'll have a look at this once the recipe's done. So you can see it's crushed it down into diamond dust. It can also be used for other things, like for example, crushing stone stairs into cobblestone stairs, or moss or melons or other things into biofuel. It can also be used to crush down iron clumps or clumps of ores. We'll get to that here in a second though. The electrolytic separator. This separates a liquid into its respective components. So for example, we'll use water for example, electrolytic. So the electrolytic separator, you just feed the input and it separates it into 2 outputs. So heavy water, for example, would be iridium and oxygen. Water is hydrogen and oxygen. Brine is sodium and chlorine. This is the only way to get some of these items. So for example, certain machines will require chlorine to run. Or you need the chlorine, I believe, to make sulfuric acid, so you use an electrolytic separator as part of the process. It's pretty simple. This is the input. These are the two gases that are created, and this is the energy. Now, what you can do is, for example, the fluid, we'd be having input from the back in this example, and then we want to separate it into two separate tanks. The left would be output 1, which is dark blue. Right would be output 2, which is light blue. Dark blue, light blue. So output 1 would output the one on the left, output 2 would output the one on the right. And then we can also set it over here. We'll use this one over here as an example. So you can set it so that, see, this one's blowing. So the hydrogen in this example is being taken out already, but the hydrogen and oxygen would build up. But say you don't need the oxygen, you click dumping excess, which would let it fill up to a certain amount, and then dump it, or you just click dumping, which just dump all of it. In this case, we're clicking dumping because we only want the hydrogen for this other machine. Next, we have the purification chamber. The purification chamber, I believe, uses oxygen. Purification. Yep, the purification chamber uses oxygen on a ore or a raw piece of ore to create two clumps. So you input using the gas tab, you have the back set, for example, to input, and you'd have your item come in the left or the front or wherever you want it to come through. And it would turn that, for example, one of these, it would turn, for example, this raw nickel into, we're using oxygen, into two nickel clumps. Now, the interesting thing is, this is where our first early game ore duping setup is going to come from. Basically, in this example, we use a purification chamber and some oxygen, which requires an electrolytic separator and a water source. And we make, for example, two nickel clumps. These can be crushed in the crusher to two dirty nickel dusts. These dirty nickel dusts can be refined into two normal nickel dust, which can then be smelted into actual nickel. But the thing is, if you use the, where is it? Use the ores, for example. So if you input the ores directly, we get 3 osmium clumps, which would be 3 dirty osmium dusts, 3 osmium, and 3 osmium ingots, which means it's tripling the amount of output from a single ore. So this is a very useful setup for early game ore duping. Now let's talk about the gas burning generator. This one we'll get to in a little bit, but basically it just takes ethylene to create an output. And then we have the energized smelter, which is basically a furnace. Now, if we have a look back here, all of these can be upgraded. So if we look at for tier installer in JEI, there's basic, advanced, elite, and ultimate. Basically, so we'll get one of each so we can demonstrate. Advanced. So this one, for example, is already basic. It has 3 slots. We click, now it has 5 slots. We use the elite, it now has 7 slots. We use ultimate, it has 9 slots, which is a lot. It has a lot of slots. And we can also set this to auto sort, so it will automatically split everything along all of these. What's the difference? Is basically the ultimate version, for example, compared to the basic, is A, faster, and B, has more input slots. So instead of only doing 1 item at a time, we can do, for example, 9 items at a time. We can also use the different types of upgrades that Mekanism has, like the speed upgrade and the energy upgrade. You're going to want to use these hand in hand. So for every speed upgrade you add, the amount of energy it uses increases. But if you max out the speed upgrades and then don't do anything about the energy upgrades, then it's not going to be able to keep the internal power buffer's not going to be able to keep up. So you want to use the energy upgrades to make it more energy efficient. That way you can have it running on max speed and max energy efficiency all the time. And if we go over here, you can uninstall these upgrades one at a time. It'll automatically put them back. Or you want to put them back in, then it'll automatically install them. And this is only available for a few items, like the infusion, metallurgic infuser, the enrichment chamber, the crusher, the purification chamber, and the smelting, the energized smelter. There's a few more ones, but these are the ones that you're going to use most of the time. let's talk about the different kinds of alloys. So we have the we'll start with the control circuit, because you're going to need the control circuit to make your cables. The control circuit is iron and 2 millibuckets of redstone. Oh, sorry, 20 millibuckets of redstone. 20 millibuckets of redstone and 1 osmium to create a control circuit. You're also going to need steel. Steel can be done if we open. So we can get steel from smelting steel dust. How do we get steel dust? You get it from enriched iron. So that's 10 millibuckets of carbon and 1 enriched iron to create a steel dust, which is then smelted into steel. How do you get enriched iron? 10 millibuckets of coal and 1 piece of iron. So basically, to create one steel, you'd have to put iron and 1 piece of coal through a metallurgic infuser, and then put that enriched iron plus a piece of coal into the metallurgic infuser again to create steel dust, which is then can be smelted. This can be made a lot easier using, for example, that enriched coal. So we run the coal through the enrichment chamber first, and then we put it in here, and we can go 8 pieces of iron at once. And so we're only using 1 coal per 8 iron instead of 1 coal per iron. So for example, using enriched coal, and you want to make steel, you can make 4 steel with 1 coal, because you'd use half that coal to make the enriched iron, and the other half of that coal to be used to make steel dust. Now we also have the different types of alloys. So if we go over here, alloy. The infused alloy is redstone, 10 millibuckets, and iron in a metallurgic infuser. The reinforced alloy is diamond, which is diamond dust or enriched diamond, depending on which one you prefer, and 1 infused alloy. The enriched diamond can be made in the enrichment chamber, the diamond dust can be made in the crusher. Now we have the hardest one, which is the atomic alloy. This requires 1 reinforced alloy, but also 4 millibuckets of refined obsidian dust, or refined obsidian. Now how do we get refined obsidian? So we'll go over here, refined obsidian dust. This can be used by putting obsidian dust and 10 millibuckets of diamond in a metallurgic infuser. And the obsidian dust can be made using the enrichment chamber with 1 piece of obsidian. So for example, we'd have to go 1 piece of obsidian, and then we'd have to put that through the enrichment chamber, and then we'd have to put it through the metallurgic infuser with, in this case, we'd probably need 4 refined obsidian dusts. So 4 diamonds that have been crushed, put all 4 of those crushed diamonds into the metallurgic infuser with all 4 of your obsidian dust to create refined obsidian dust, and that can be used as an infusion for the atomic alloy, and you're going to need 4. So it's basically 1 obsidian and 4 diamonds per, unless you use the enriched versions. You can also use it in an osmium compressor to create refined obsidian ingots using osmium. And you can also use these alloys on cables. So if we go infused alloy, for example, this will take the tier of the cable up from basic to advanced. We grab the reinforced alloy. It upgrades it to elite. We go atomic alloy. Upgrades it to ultimate. The ultimate is the fastest of all the cable tiers. However, if you're playing a mod pack, like for example what I'm playing, all the mods 9, I do not recommend you, as great as these are, I love the logistical cables, but they're not very friendly on lag. They're very laggy. The universal cables, to my knowledge, aren't that bad, but logistical cables, on my first playthrough, I used mostly logistical cables, and it was very poor for the frame rate. But they are fun as fuck to use, because you can see everything going through. See how fast that went? Look again. Look at the cable. Straight through. So let's talk about a basic ore duping setup that we have here. So basically we have this pump, this electric pump, which is placed above the water. You can also use like this sink, for example, if you're playing all the mods 9, or it's a water block, but I'm using a pump for this example. Then we've got our energy. This is our example energy source. We've got an electrolytic separator separating the hydrogen and the oxygen. The oxygen's being dumped, we don't need that. The hydrogen's going through a pressurized tube into here, which is being imported from the bottom. So the gas and then input. And then our given item would come in from the back. And then we've set the front to output. Oh no, front's supposed to be output. There we go. And it would go through this ultimate logistical transporter into a crusher, which would then crush the item into this enrichment chamber, which would enrich it and then to energize smelter, which would smelt it. Each of these should be configured to have the back as the input and the front as the output. You don't have to do that for your example. You can have it in whatever configuration you want, as long as whichever side you want the item coming out of is configured in here to set as to input or output. One other thing I forgot to mention with the metallurgical infuser that a lot of people really get stuck on is automation. So I believe I mentioned this in my AE2 video, but so other mods aren't very good at figuring out infusions. Mekanism is. So what you can do is, in this example, we want to automate it. So we want the iron for the infused alloy to come to the top. So we have this top set to input. Then we want the redstone for the infusion to come in the back. We don't actually set the back to input. We set it to extra. Then on infused types, we set it to input. That way, the chest, let's say we have a buffer chest here, for example, and it's pulling the items down. Imagine this isn't here. So we have our iron would come automatically through the top because Mekanism recognizes it as not an infuser. It's something that can be infused. Whereas redstone is an infusion type. So automatically Mekanism, we'd obviously have to configure this away, this little connection here, but Mekanism would automatically pull the iron down and the redstone to the back. It would pull it to wherever the extra was. That's something that got me for a really long time, and it made automating this metallurgical infuser very difficult, but that's how you automate infusions. Now let's talk about some early game power. So in this example, we're using hopper botany pots from botany pots and some insanium farmland from mystical agriculture to create melons. These melons are going to this basic crushing factory to create biofuel. The biofuel is going into the pressurized reaction chamber with hydrogen to create ethylene. For some reason it's not working, and I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, that's why. It turns out I did some configuration to this setup yesterday and I forgot to add the sink back here. So the water's going into here, it's creating hydrogen, but it's all automatically being pulled into here. The hydrogen's being combined with the biofuel to create ethylene, which is being taken from this pressurized tube into this gas burning generator. Its internal buffer is full, but if we put, for example, ultimate energy cube and a universal cable, so it's producing energy and it can be sent into this cube, which is slowly filling up. By the looks of things, it produces around 100-ish FE per tick, by the looks of things. It's a very good option for early game power generation, to be honest. It's one of the best ones. You can also, I showed this example in my All the Mods 9 playthrough, you can use XNet to make this a lot more compact. But I just wanted to show this example using as much only Mekanism as possible, just because I feel like it's better for the sake of teaching, so that you know how to use the mod independently, just in case a given mod pack doesn't have XNet, Laser IO, AE2, that sort of thing, how you would do it without those things. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of Mekanism. I will do a follow-up video going through the more advanced stuff, like the reactors, the chemicals, those like big thermal processing plants, whatever, and reactors as well. I believe I said that already. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.